Hello class, I just got a question asking about how I did that rainbow way back in one of the earlier videos. I believe actually this one where I'm working in the channels palette and I did some gradients and then I ended up with this rainbow. One of your fellow students was trying to recreate this process and it was not going according to plan. There were some issues with it. So I just wanted to quickly go a little more in depth as to what was going on over here. The student sent me this file, which is just a black square in RGB mode. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually create one from scratch so you can follow along if you'd like. I'm going to go to File, New, and in this case it's 2100 by 2100 pixels, 300 pixel resolution, RGB color mode at 8-bit, I believe is what she had it at. So let me double check that real quick. Yes, by going to image mode, you can see that it was 8 bits per channel. If you click on, or right click on, if you click on the flyout here, you can go to different document information as well and look it up that way. But for me, just image mode, that's fast enough. RGB color 8-bit. All right, so that said, let's make a new one. The shortcut key for a new document is Control N. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the 2100 by 2100, 300 pixels. Doesn't really matter, I just need a square. I'm going to make the background black just by default so that I don't have to fill it. And you can do that just by choosing black. Tell it OK. So we have a black square. Now, why did I want a black square? Well, as explained in the earlier videos, white essentially means that every channel is representing its color fully on, and it can turn on with as much power as 255 on. And this was just kind of covered earlier. So if I hit B on my keyboard for brush and just use the right bracket key to make a big old brush, that's as on as RGB gets, which means here's just as red as it can be. Whereas if I came in and used, say, a gray that had a brightness of 50%, and I come back to red, we should see a red that is much darker by, in fact, half. So we have as bright as red can be represented and about half as bright as red can be represented. And if we come in and do one at, say, 15%, we'll see it fairly dark. And we'll come back here. Oops, I'm sorry, I put it on the RGB, so it had no effect. I've got to select the red and click. All right, and now if we come back, you can see that it's a even darker red. Now, this will be a bit tricky to demonstrate with just the channels. You saw how I had to go to the red channel to activate it, but I wanted to see really that I was only on the red channel, so I turned off the other two channels, but then I couldn't see the color and I clicked on the wrong one, all of that. So what I'm going to do so that I don't have to keep fiddling with this while I demonstrate is create a second view. And let me show you what that means. If I go up to Window and Arrange, I have the option to create a new window for, I didn't name this, so it's just Untitled 1. But if I click that, I have now two tabs that appear to be the same. I'm going to just drag them off so that they break apart. And what this will do, is actually be two windows into the same file. Much as you'd have two windows into the same room, if you rearrange the furniture in that room, you would see it, the furniture moving regardless of the window you're looking in. With multiple views, you're looking at the same file. So now on the one that's active, I can switch to the red. And now if I were to add another dot, you can see the colored result on the left. So you can see that I'm just smushing in some gray. Now this is where things get interesting. I'm just going to undo a few steps. There we go. If I come over to green, where everything is off, so it's all black, and add in a dot, you can see that we've got this green, and that's it. But notice that we're getting more of an orange color over here. Well, what's going on? Well, the green was at 15%. If I move it up to 50% of brightness, and I'm only paying attention to brightness because I'm on one channel, which means that the hue and the saturation is going to be ignored because it's just in the green. I'm essentially mixing this stuff. Notice that the green I'm getting here is different from what's happening here. I'm getting like this weird color. And that's because the mix of red is different. to the green. And that's the key here. Color is mixtures of different amounts of light. If you recall from the color constancy video or documentation, if you decided to read that instead of watching the video, the mixture of colored light changed the perception of the final color. And so the same thing's going on here. When I do 50% green on 100% red, I end up with this kind of yellow-orange. When I do 50% green on 50% red, I end up with this much duller, essentially green going on. Now, if I were to add in blue at 50%, you should just get in the center here this gray, because they're all at 50%. What does that mean? That means it's just going to reproduce it. But if I bring it up here, keep in mind we've got 50% blue. See how it's gray on the blue channel on the right? 50% green. See how it's the same gray? But 100% red, we don't get gray, we get a pink because there's more red light in there. Now, if we change the mixture by, say, using darker red, we'll end up, oh, sorry, I'm on RGB. We'll end up with this weird kind of blue-green color instead. Now, if we use that on the blue channel as well, you can see that we're getting with different mixtures of light on the channel, light being represented by the black to white gray pixels, there we are. Gray pixels, we're getting different mixtures of color. If you use the exact same percentage of light on everything, we're just going to get black to white. That's it. That would be the same thing as just, and I can prove this real fast. If I fill this with black, if I just click with this 50%, am I at 50%? Not quite. 50% gray, while on RGB, we get gray. And the reason for that is that we have 50% gray on everything. And let me bring up the color palette here. Actually, let's see. I need the info palette. My apologies. Windows, info. Here it is. This will be a little more useful than the color palette for us. The info palette allows you to take the eyedropper tool, and as you mouse over sections of the image, it will take a sample of the pixels, or the pixel, depending on how you're sampling, and it will show you what the values are. So over here, these numbers, pay attention to this. When I'm on black, it's all 0, right? But when I'm on gray, it's 128, 128, 128. 128 is halfway between 0 and 255. So voila, it's gray. Now here's where it gets fun. I'm just going to select all on the red channel and then move it. Now I have black as the background, so it's filling it with black. If I had white, I'd have a problem, be filling it with white. All right, so now everything else is the same. It's just that gray dot we started with on the RGB channel. And you can see that though that we're getting different colors. So if I come over with my eyedropper tool now and activate this window by clicking on it, you can see that I have, oh, it's quite a bit upset at me now. I did not click on the window properly. There we go. You can see that on black we have zero. Look over at the info palette again. On black we have all zeros. On the gray we have 128 all down the line. But on this teal color, we're getting something else. Oh, I'm on red. My apologies. So this is where it gets a little complicated. I was sampling the red, even though I had everything on. You saw me stumble through the interface at the beginning of the video, which is the entire reason that I had two windows. I'm still stumbling a bit on the interface. Channels palette is a very, very old palette, and it's picky about the way that you do things. You can turn on and off eyeballs to change the view, but depending on what you have selected, it will be active. So technically you can see everything, but if you have only one channel selected, then you're only affecting the one, which means the sample is going to keep saying that it's gray or black. What I want, and this is an aside, what I want is to have the RGB active and RGB visible, all of them visible. So let's try this again. Pay attention to the info. You'll see that we have black at 0, we have gray at 128, but this teal color, we have red at 0, and that's because all I did was move the red dot up from where it was. So there is no red here, but it's still 128 in green, 128 in blue, so we get this teal color. And then up here, we have red at 128, and we have green and blue at 0. So in other words, thinking back to the color constancy video that we watched, Colorful Notions, again, color is produced by the differences in the spectrum of light. So when they're all the same, you get a intensity of light from as much as you can produce at white to nothing when you've shut everything off at black, to some middle ground of a gray, any gray in between. So in other words, to produce colors, we need to have a change between those channels. Now we could just change one channel, or I'm going to select all. And actually, let's do this. My apologies. I'm in the wrong window again. Pop over here, select all in the blue channel. And the reason I'm selecting all is I'll deselect with Control D. Oh, it's working now on this version. So some versions of Photoshop will require you to select everything in the channels. This version is not the case. My apologies on that. You can see as I move, we're getting different colors. Now, another way, and that's just because we have 0, so it's a full intensity on or off. But if I were to mix things with some amount at 89% brightness of red, you can see we get a whole slew of colors because there's a difference now between these, and we can see what that difference is again by getting the eyedropper tool. I activate this one and I'm going to be sure to be on RGB here. You can see that we're getting like wildly different intensities now. 226 in red as compared to 128 in green and blue, 226 in red as compared to 128 in green and 0 in blue. And again, I'm just looking up at info to see that. And then this red is just a 226. So these differences are making different colors, and we can get a huge array of colors. So the student was having issues when they were doing the gradient trick that I showed. They weren't getting the colors. I suspect that this is what was happening. I'm going to select the channel. Actually, I'm going to select all the channels by going to red, green, blue. I'm going to fill it with black to start so that everything's off. But I have black and white, and I have our biggest paintbrush, which is the gradient tool. It's really just a giant paintbrush going from black to white, really foreground color to background color. If I did this on RGB, I just get a gray gradient. But which is to be expected. This is how it would normally behave. Here's the point of interest. The gradient is the same on all of the channels. Now, if I were to go to green and move it, you can see that it went from gray to gray tinted green. And as it gets very light, it starts to disappear. If I go to blue and move it, you can see that we're getting these blue tints, but we have this red and yellow where the other overlap. So this is following in with what the student was telling me, that they were getting a single color of gradient. Now, the trick that I did was I had a rotation. So instead of just having standard values, and to do the rotation in the channels palette, I do have to select all, Control T. Now, as I rotate this, you can see that it's no longer different intensities of black to white, where there's some there's some amount of color being added because it overtakes the otherwise similar colors. With this rotation, we're getting grays and blacks and whites and such at different things. So you can see we're getting very different colors. So if we come into each channel, and I'm not sure I explained that terribly well there. What I'm saying is, if we were to zoom in now on this window, and I were to just toggle through the different colors, you can see how the rotation means that if we even just look at this spot right in here while I'm wiggling the mouse around, it has different values altogether all over the place. It's not just the case of two of the channels being some amount of white that's fairly similar and another one being much brighter or darker, meaning that it's essentially being taken in or out and overpowering or underpowering the image so that you end up with a fairly simple color, as we originally saw. As we originally saw when I just did the good old brush demonstration. I'm going to press B on the keyboard for brush, X on the keyboard to flip my color, so I have white active. And I screwed that up by accidentally clicking on RGB again. So I'll just do something like this one more time. My apologies. Brush, and once more. Not going to make the same mistake. Red, green, blue. All right. So essentially, when the gradients were in the same rotation, we were ending up with a very similar effect to this. You had a very bright white in one area, resulting in an overpowered color or hue, but eventually the rest of them kind of matched up because they were just gradients. They went from light to dark. When you rotate it, though, they don't match up. Which makes sense. If you rotate something from up to down to an angle, it will no longer match. Simple enough. So now, let's grab the gradient, black to white. What I'm just going to do, what I'm just going to do is when I do gradient, instead of just going up and down, I'm going to, on one channel, go up and down. And then the other channel, I'm going to do left to right. And the last channel, I'm going to do an angle. And by doing it, nothing should quite line up. So I should get the rainbow effect that you saw in the original video. So let me reset this by filling it with black. Go to the red channel. We'll do the up to down on that. You see that, in fact, we do now have red. All the other pixels are off. And now in the green, I'm just going to go, I guess, left to right, which means the darkest spot right now should be the left. And you can see that, yes, indeed. The bottom left corner here is black. So let's keep that going. Going from white to black. So I'll move it over here. And you can see that we ended up with white to black here. But if I flip that, I end up with this whole rainbow instead, because now there's no position where everything is black or everything is white. So we get this rainbow. And that's the only trick to the rainbow effect that was going on. Just make sure that none of the pixels are exactly the same, because if you end up with black in the same area, then all of a sudden it's going to have some area of absolute overlap. So the fastest way to take care of that is just go left, up and down on one, left and right on the other, and then try to avoid the darkest area by flipping the last one. And that's the key to get this rainbow effect that I did. Yeah, and you can actually see this kind of palette if we double click on the color picker. If we change we have hue and saturation and brightness, and this is just a reference to this axis bar here. So you can see this is the saturation now. This is the brightness. In other words, how much is white and black on there. We also have red, green, and blue. And so if we switch over, this is removing the blue axis to the right. This is moving the green axis to the right, so we can add more or less green. This is adding the blue axis to it, which I'm sorry, I got that. I got that a little off. This is actually cyan, which is no, that does make sense. It's because it's the opposite of it. Let me show you. I confused myself. Just a moment. So we'll just do some color palette. Okay, check it out. We've got green. Come on. We've got now let's bring it up and make sure. Maybe I am off on this. It's been a little while since I've been in here. All right, so now red. Do we have red in here? No, red is actually, looks like over here. We go to yellow and magenta. So we've got those guys. So this is a mixture of blue on here, oddly enough. No, it is correct. My apologies. This part confuses me, so I'm saying it very poorly. Here's 100% white on the red. Here is 0% white on the red, but we still have an amount of green or blue. So you notice with no red, right? See, this is with red. With no red, we would be in this section of our additive color palette. In other words, we're going from green, and then it's flipped upside down. I should rotate this. Cancel real quick. Come here. Come here. If I can grab the corner, I'll just use this one. And rotate this around so we can actually see. So the last bit of ramble, I promise. Deselect. All right, this makes sense now. I had things upside down. It wasn't clicking for me. All right. Now, And I also have it backwards. Hold on. Control A, Control T. Actually, I don't have to do that. I can just go to Edit, Transform, Flip horizontally. All right. Now, let me bring up that palette. Okay, so to me, the other one, that's how I normally orient it. This is apparently how Photoshop has things oriented, and it was really throwing me for a loop. Yeah, this makes sense. Okay. Yeah. All right, so with 0% red, zero on the redness, we get this cyan because it's the opposite of red. See? And more than that, notice this has green, green, to cyan, cyan, to blue, and we have this black over here. And that's where the 0% red's coming in. If we bring it up to 100% red, you can see it in here now, we have red, red, yellow, yellow, white, this section, and then magenta, magenta. So you can see that the palette has shifted. We're essentially bringing in or out the opposite. So, and by opposite, I mean truly the opposing color. This is referred to as complementary color generally. So if you had a subtractive color theory class, color design, for example, the complementary color of red would normally be green. That would be the opposite color. Mixing those two together would create a gray or a brown, depending on the amount of pigment you have. If you haven't had that class yet, don't worry. It will be drilled into you later. In this case, because it's the additive color system, the complement of red is not green, as we would be used to with like Crayola crayons or Play-Doh. If you ever played around with a lot of Play-Doh as a kid, it's actually cyan. So on this step, we have no cyan because we've switched this over to as much red as possible. So now we're in this section. Over on this side, we have no red, so we can see the cyan now. It's the complement. You see we've got black and no white on this board, but over here we have white up in this corner, but no black anymore because we're literally bringing in or out the red channel on it. Whew, all right. So that's why that wasn't clicking for me. It was literally upside down and backwards from how I'm used to it, but there you have it. It's in there. These are just, again, all of the colors on here. So the opposite of green, you can see is magenta. And so sure enough, if we bring out the green by bringing it to the magenta side, we get the black corner and no white, but we've got this magenta. And if we bring it up, voila, we get the other part. So that's what's dancing around on there. Might as well show you the blue. Opposite of blue is yellow. We've brought out all of the blue, and now we've brought in all of the yellows. So now we've got this yellow up here. We've got black down here. And you can see that the sample is different. Oh, I forgot. So if I move the sampler over, you can see this is the last step. The opposite color, if I bring it down here, it will be literally correct. Red, because it's now fully red, fully black. Green, I've got it down in this corner. Fully green, fully black, and blue, fully black. So the sample that we have is the last key. By default, it went to the top right corner because by default I had white, which is why it was upside down and backwards. So that's all the mysteries. Sorry about that confusing 5 minutes there. In short though, the answer to the question, how do you build the rainbow? Just make sure that you have the gradients so that they don't line up in any way whatsoever. The key is that last one has to not have the blacks lining up, where notice we've got a black down here, a black down here, so we'd want the last one to have white. That'll give us this full rainbow effect. All right, there you have it for the interested reader. Go ahead and keep on going through those videos. If you have any questions, shoot me a message either through Canvas or via email. Don't forget to put in CMPGR236 on email or I'll miss it. If you're going to send me an attachment, Canvas is not the way to do it. It tends to flip out on any sized file that would be considered normal by us as computer graphics artists. Send it to my email instead. I'll be able to download it from there. All right. Otherwise, have fun. Again, do let me know if you have any questions. See you next time.